Did y'all hear that?
Yes.
I've never heard that in my
What
life.
did you hear?
She said, recording in progress.
Oh,
It's really creepy.
that's
Literally
so weird
never
because it doesn't show up on my end. So that's funny. Hi, everyone. Today I'm welcoming three brilliant guests to my channel to discuss Malazan battles and leadership. So here we have returning guest Philip Chase, our favorite Dr. Fantasy here, and and medievalist. And then we also have Pete from Ponderings with Pete. And Pete has a fantastic channel. He is reading through Malazan Book of the Fallen right now. And Pete, you just said what book you finished. Was it Told the Hounds you recently finished? Or...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
one book
Pete,
ahead of you.
yeah, and Pete you don't have any dedicated videos yet, but you are planning to do those on reread, right? That's
correct. Yeah, I'm gonna do a reread and add in all the ICE books, the Excellent books when I do the reread of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So, and do a bunch of videos around it then.
Fantastic. Yay. And then also welcoming Alan to my channel. So Alan from the Library of Alexandria, who we all know and love, and he has done some fantastic videos on Malazan Book of the Fallen. We were just talking about that right before. And he is very excited to talk about some Malazan battles today. So we're very excited to have him as well. So very excited to have all three of you here. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I am reading through the series for the first time. I just recently finished Reaper's Gale, and we'll see how much I can remember from the earlier books because it has been a while for me, but there certainly is a lot to say. And so starting off, we're just going to go ahead and talk about, in a non-spoiler way, and then get into spoilers, what we could say is unique about this series regarding leadership and battle scenes. So I think we could start off with the topic of leadership. And this was actually an idea that Pete brought to my attention because Pete has been noticing this theme of leadership throughout the series. And Pete, is there anything you want to say, like in a non-spoiler way, about starting off our discussion about leadership in Malazan Book of the Fallen?
Yeah, I think his take on the leadership portrayed in Malazan Book of the Fallen is very interesting because I feel like, first of all, a lot of the decisions outside of some very specific decisions, they're not necessarily always shown. So in his view on leadership that he shows tends to be like, why do people follow these people? And we see that with some very specific characters that it's very interesting to see. So like the nature of whether it's charisma or just trust that people have in their leaders and why is something that pops up throughout the series. And it's very interesting to see.
Oh, that's such a good point, because I think that's something that has been a really interesting thing to track, is how trust is formed between even any character in the series. So that's a really good point. Anyone want to follow up on that, Philip? Or Alan? Either one of you?
Go ahead, Alan.
I mean, I agree with Pete. Like it is really interesting to see the why people follow like the other people, especially in the military aspect. And I teach classical history, and so it's interesting to see the comparisons with people like why anybody followed Caesar on his insane suicide missions, and the way Caesar inspired loyalty was different than the way Augustus would inspire loyalty, because Augustus was not a great general. Augustus was a great politician who had the friendship of a great general. And so why people followed them, why during the 5th century BC, why the Athenians followed people like Pericles, who, gave them this dream of democracy and this golden age of Athens, this very humanist kind of attitude, versus demagogues like Cleon, who, stirred up their anger and their fear and their spirit of war. And so seeing the comparisons with in the Malazan Marines especially have a ton of like individual autonomy within their units, which is the way the Romans, conquered the world, by having, you have the overall command structure, but within your unit, within your century, you have the Roman soldier, the Roman legionnaire had more individual autonomy than, say, the Greek hoplite. And that's allowed them, when things went pear-shaped, as Terry Pratchett would say, they're not stuck following orders that are no longer like the best thing to do right there. Like, and so that trust, not just with soldier to commander, but for commander to the soldier, like the commander trusts the soldiers, and doesn't need to like micromanage every little thing that they do. And that's a lot in Malazan. Like, you don't always have like, you've got the sergeants, you got, Fiddler, you got the sergeants like telling the underlings what to do, but you don't have, Tavor's not there in every encounter barking orders. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's such an interesting point about autonomy. I had not thought about that, honestly. And that's fantastic. And I love that you tied in classical history to that too. That was amazing. Philip, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the series explores just about every possible facet of leadership. You have leaders who are competent, and you have leaders who have charisma, and a lot of them have ambition. And these are, there are other qualities as well. There are leaders who are great in battle, but might not be such great politicians. And to really maintain that position, often in these scenarios where things can get a little cutthroat, you have to be a little bit of everything, perhaps. And we see the failure of leaders who are really great in some of these respects, but have come up short in others, like certain leaders who are very competent but lack charisma or lack the ability to delegate responsibility. Maybe that particular leader is in a position where she can't trust the people around her and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of really cool political intrigue too, I think, in the series around leadership. And of course, this extends not just toward the human characters, but toward the gods themselves. The gods are constantly in this game of trying to one up each other and manipulate the humans. And so it's pretty crafty stuff. And you just have leaders who are very, very savvy, and others who are not so much. And so you get just the full array. Every single quality I think that you could ascribe to a leader is on display at some point or other in the series.
I love that. And I definitely saw that parallel too between how people are looking towards gods for leadership and how they are looking for humans for good leaders. And you see also just a number of different types of followers too in the book, or different types of people who are either questioning leaders or trusting leaders, and they want kind of different things. You see characters who want certainty, and those who are struggling with that. And just, it's very fascinating just to see all these different complex relationships. And I think what you said is just kind of circles back to what Alan was saying about different leaders in history, how there are just these different qualities of leadership. And we definitely see that represented throughout the series in both the gods and, of course, the humans. So fantastic point. Yeah. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
I mean, I like that every general and every leader is not competent in Malazan. They're just not. Like, I mean, my distaste of Empress Lysine is well known and well documented. Like, I think the empire was poorly managed. That's, people disagree, and that's fine. But I mean, like, Lysine's still a good character. Kellenved, like, she's not Kellenved. And I'm much more of a Kellenved stan than I am Lysine. But I mean, Lysine's a great character. Like, it shows the different, that's a massive task. It's not super her fault that I don't like it. Like, it's a massive task to manage this empire out of nowhere. You know what I mean? So it's good stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's sometimes the case too, where sometimes if you are kind of rooting against a character or leader or for them, you could sort of still see sides that make them understandable in a way, like what you just said, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In reaction to what Alan just said too, and I actually agree with Alan that the empire was in many respects poorly managed. I don't think, and we're not going to get into spoilers yet here, but I don't think there was a lot of room to maneuver for Lassine in many of these situations. So it was often just a choice of, an array of bad choices that to choose from. And then in regard to Kellenved, and he's a character I enjoy thoroughly as well, but I think he has his weak spots too. And some of them were in many respects complemented by Lassine. Her organizational skills, for example, were far superior to his. He's a more chaotic figure. And in some respects, well, we won't get into spoilers here, but I think that I would argue that Lassine was absolutely vital to the founding of the empire. But that on her own, yes, some of her weaknesses really did show in how she dealt with the crises of her rule. So, yeah.
It's very interesting. And I also, it's hard not to get into spoilers yet. Of course, we will in a little bit.
You see that. I mean, you see that in history too. Like people who are like teams of people who have allies around them, and they're stronger. But then when like one of them dies or one of them leaves, or or there's a falling out, and then all of a sudden, it's like Caesar. I mean, Julius Caesar had such a fantastic like team of people around him, and then just everything's scattered, and he's dead, and now freaking Octavius and Antony are trying to kill each other, and Labienus is working with the Parthians now, and all sorts of things. It just breaks apart, and that's where civil war comes from.
Yeah, and I think that that's another thing that's also fascinating in Malazan too, in Malazan Book of the Fallen, is that I've been noticing is that how different people surrounding the leaders definitely have a huge influence on things and how effective these leaders are. So really good point there. Good. Anything you want to add, Pete? Anything?
I have one thought, but I think it's kind of spoilery. Okay,
we'll put that one on pause then. Yes. I guess from here too, we are also going to be talking about battles. Is there anything non-spoiler we could say about how battles are approached in this series versus other series? And I know that both Philip and Alan have both read Esselmont's books too, and feel free if you want to share anything that you see unique in Esselmont's books too, if you want to mention those too. I mean, I haven't read those, so of course, non-spoiler, perfect time to talk about any of that.
I have a couple just non-spoiler thoughts on the way that Erikson handles battles in his books, and I would include the Carcanus trilogy as well in this. I'm not going to give any specifics on any of these battles yet or anything like that, but for me, I think that when I can't remember who was saying this to me, maybe it was AP, probably it was, because it was a pretty brilliant thought, but the idea was that when you look back on a book and you're remembering it, those battle scenes seem so big, they loom so large, particularly when you're talking about Malazan. And then you go back and you read it, and it's actually just a couple pages, the actual battle part. But what I think that Erikson and Esselmont too, by the way, what they do really, really well, and I think this is what actually probably fascinates them more than the battle itself, which is really well done, by the way. I mean, the battle scenes are just incredible. I mean, you look at Pale, you look at, I'm not going to say all the specific ones because we're going to talk about them probably later, but they're just amazing. I mean, they're just mind-blowing. But I think what really fascinates them is the humanity involved in the lead up to the battles and in the aftermath of the battles. That you see them really featuring that much more than all the action of the battle itself. And without those features, I don't think the battle would have much of an impact. Without all of that lead up and without all of that tension building and without all of that that pathos that follows the tragedy of it and the incredible bonds that can take place as a result of it. There are some just incredible moments, just really moving stuff. And Erikson has talked about the influence of Vietnam War era films and stories on the Malazan series plenty of times, but you can really see the importance, I think, of the humanity of it all because of the bonds between the soldiers, and of course the tragedy of the losses that they experience and the PTSD. I mean, they really do follow up with all this stuff. And for me, that's what makes the battles as powerful as they are. Without all that, the leading up and the follow through, the battles would be hollow for me. But they're brilliantly done. I mean, they're just explosive and massive and just crazy. So yeah.
That is so beautifully said, because I completely agree with you. As I think some of my favorite battles that I can recall so far have had these amazing moments of pathos. So yeah, that's absolutely the case. It does bring that level of humanity to it. But then there are also some just really cool, weird, wild things and amazing combination of kind of infantry of just kind of your normal sort of battle sort of scenario and magic. And speaking of AP, he had a wonderful video on Moranth munitions and how the technology of that evolved. And so it was just it was a great video. I should probably link it below, but it's just fantastic just to see the way that magic is utilized, the way the technology is utilized in this world, and how that's brought forward in battle in the series. So I think it's just fantastic from that point of view too.
Yeah, I love sappers. Like Moranth munitions like add so much to it. Like I love sappers. I like the way, I mean, I like the battles. I like war in books. Prior to reading Malazan, two of the series that I had read like more than one time, or most of the sharp ones, is Bernard Cornwell's Sharp books, which is Napoleonic War, there's a huge battle in every single book. And then the Black Company series, which the battles remind me a lot of the Black Company, but like more in depth, I guess, because you don't see a lot from the commander's perspective in Black Company. It's from the people like inside the city and the people outside the city. And so it's the soldiers, it's I guess the boots on the ground, if you will. And a lot of big things happen and a lot of people die. Like a lot of people just die, like in a sentence. Boom. Oh, you liked that name character? Watched him, like, Croker watches him like bite it. Boom, dead. Like repeatedly in Black Company. And that was just so weird. It's like, you can't kill named characters in a sentence. There's no, what do you mean there's no death scene? They're just like, oh yeah, I watched him die and him die and him die. They were my friends. I'll miss them. Done. And that was just bizarre. And it's like that a lot in the Malazan books, except Glenn Cook has a much more like sparse writing style. So it's not quite as, in depth as what's going on with Erickson, but Erickson's like a combination of Cornwell, where like Cornwell doesn't show inside because we don't care. We're in Sharp's perspective. We're on Arthur Wellesley's side. We're on the side of, the Brits and the trying to take this, fortress Gawilgar in India, right? Like we care about Sharp and what's going on with the Brits. And so we have a lot of that, what's happening beforehand, like the lead up, like how the soldiers are terrified because their only hope and promotion is to blow a hole in the side of the building, or inside of the fort, and be the first one through that survives in the forlorn hope so that you can get a promotion, because that's the only way you can do it if you don't have the money to buy a commission. And so they're all terrified because they all know they're going to die. And so we see all of that. And then afterwards, I mean, we do see that afterwards, but not as much as we do in Malazan, because it's multi-POV as opposed to just from Sharp's perspective. And so I also like really enjoy that. And it's very varied in the types of battles. Like you have the Chain of Dogs, which is one of my favorite. It's like Coltane is Julius Caesar reborn. And like, it's just his force of will that carries them across the entire bloody continent. It's just awesome. And then freaking Capistan, which is one of the most terrifying scenes I've ever read in any book. Capistan is brilliant, but yes. Then we move on to Yucatan, which is one of the best single chapters I've read in any book as far as siege, terror, aftermath. It's just really well done. And I'm always really anxious during a Malazan battle because people will die out of nowhere. He'll kill him right there, dead, suck it. And that makes me sad when people die. And so I'm always really, really tense because it's also chaotic, and he'll jump. The good thing about multi-POV is the jumping. I like when like there's big battles, the jumping from head to head. I think it makes it really chaotic, which I like. Oh, and then the crawl in Reaper's Gale, which I love.
Yes.
Crawl is one of my favorite things as well. Like those are 4 completely different war-related things. It's just good. Like it's good stuff. That's why, I mean, again, I read books 1 through 7 4 times before I finally finished the stinking series, because that's what kept me coming back. Is every time I remembered the battles. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to get to this thing. Like I was talking about before this started. Like I knew there was something. I'm like, there's something in some book where there's a guy who's like leading this like foreigner army against them, and like it's the Red Mask stuff from Reaper's Gale. And I was like, I know I read that in a Malazan book, and I just kept not seeing it. I'm like, I must have dreamed that. That must be in a different series. And then I read Reaper's Gale again. I'm like, yes, Red Mask, this is it. I love this too. That's 5 different things.
I guess from here we could go ahead and go into spoilers.
We might as well. I'm about to spoil everything.
All right. Well, thank you so much if you've joined us this far. And from now, we're definitely going to go into spoilers. So I guess we could start off with Red Mask. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Red Mask?
I mean, I'm unpopular in the fact that I like that. And most people like, it's just weird. It seems so tangential to what's happening in Lether. Like it's just way out there. And you've got the, I forget the Lethery commander's name over there. But I mean,
No. Sorry. No. Bivat. The Atraprita?
Bivat. There you go. Yes. And versus Red Mask and his 2 freaking could change them all that for some reason have bonded to him. I mean, who's this freaking kid? Like, why does he have 2 like raptor pets? Like, what's going on? And I don't know. I like enemy commanders. One of my favorite things about books about war is when it shows both sides and both commanders trying to outdo each other. It's very like Hannibal and Scipio, like, 2 minds clashing. And Red Mask is like, where does he, I'm wondering, where does he get his competency? Like, where did it come from? Who is he? Why does he have any skill as a commander at all? But then as it progresses, you see that, well, he's definitely hot iron, right? Like he's definitely hot iron, which doesn't really end up working. And that whole thing ends in such futility where it's just a bizarre part of the book because it doesn't accomplish anything in the end except, shooting like Talk the Younger dying again. Like at the very end where it's just like, what is happening? And so I don't know. I like the commander versus commander because the Lether get the leg up, and then the all get the leg up, and back and forth. And I did not know the entire time who was going to win, where it was going to go, and it kept me guessing. And I like strategy versus strategy. It's one of my favorite things.
But there were some definitely cool things that happened there. I mean, I think that part of what was going on there, it was sort of like a scheme on the Lethery's end to send Brol Handar out there, and the Atraprita Bivat out there. And this idea was it wasn't an ethical fight to fight the all and to begin with. It was very political, as what I gathered from reading the book. And there were some fantastic scenes, like with the Kachain Chamal, like you mentioned, and just the scene where magic wouldn't work for them, for the Lethery, and with Brol Handar, that scene where they were relying on it. They were relying on their magic, and it was completely void. And just there was a fantastic scene that I lost my tab on that I loved, where it was actually described like there was a song going on there was like music to the battle scene, and it was so beautifully described. So there were some fantastic scenes there too. I'm trying to think of what else to say about that, because there were, I mean, it is a fascinating scene. And I think more than anything too, also opposite of Red Mask, I think also it was just interesting just to see the relationship dynamics there between Rolhandar, the Tistador, and the Atraprida, the Lethery, and just seeing how they worked together, even though I think there were all these assassins that were out to get Rolhandar. So just, it was very political at the same time as it was magical and crazy with the Kachain Shamal. And yeah, if anybody else wants to take off from there, I could say a couple more things, but.
I'm an Eater apologist. I'm happy anytime the Eater are in it. I don't really know why. I like them.
Why don't you go ahead, Pete? And then I do have some thoughts about what both Alan and Joanna said, but I want to hear what you think, Pete.
I think, so going back to what Alan said about the futility of the battle and the futility of like that section, this is kind of off topic, but I feel like there was somebody in Alan's Discord that was like, I feel like all the leather perspectives are just needless. Like, why do we care? And I think it was Alan, it was either Alan's Discord or in one of the Malazan Discords. And I was like, I thought about it. And I think all the Lethery perspectives in Reaper's Gale are meant, I enjoyed them to a certain extent. Like there were some horrors in there, but that's the point. I feel like they're supposed to show the horror of the Lethery Empire and how they exploit each other, how they actually work. Because I feel like in Midnight Tides, I was kind of like, okay, they're bad, they're stagnant. Why are these guys so crappy? But Reaper's Gale did. Yeah, say again.
Sorry, I said money. That's why.
Yeah, it's true. But it's like, it was very general. Like if you're going to throw at, oh, they're crappy because of money, I feel like that's very shallow because it's really the love of money that is kind of kills people sometimes. So it's kind of like, show me the love of money, the love of the things that they want versus just saying, oh yeah, capitalism.
I don't know. I mean, I see your point. I did feel like a lot of the philosophy was introduced though very beautifully in the prose in Midnight Tides. And I mean, you did see a little bit with that seal exchange harvest thing going on, but yes, it definitely comes to full play much more and in Reaper's Gale. And, it's really interesting to look at that theme of leadership and the way that the Lethery use leadership, because I mean they're really using Rulad, and the way, I don't know, it's interesting because there was actually a passage in Reaper's Gale, in Midnight Tides about the Lethery kind of worshiping an empty throne. There was this idea of an empty throne, and of course thrones are thrown all over the place in Malazan Book of the Fallen, but it was interesting just to think of Rulad on that throne and how he wasn't all there in a way.
The Lether. Oh, sorry, Philip. Go ahead. I've talked enough.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Yeah, no, I want to actually go back to some stuff that you were saying earlier, and Joanna as well. And I'm just thinking about in terms of how Erikson creates investment in the reader during a battle scene. And the way you described how you feel during a Malazan battle is very similar to how I feel. And what Joanna was saying about the relationship that we get portrayed between Atraprida, Bivat, and Rolhandar. I think that's a really cool thing that Erikson does there, because there's this whole thing going on between them where she can't just spell out what is going on behind the scenes to Rolhandar because she'll be seen as a traitor, but she's trying to save him because he's basically stepping on all kinds of toes he doesn't even realize, and he's getting himself into some problems, and there are the powers that be that want to see him eliminated because he's putting his nose where they think it doesn't belong. So I love her character because of that. I am invested in her character because I see her being a consummate soldier, very capable and very concerned for her duties, but at the same time there's the humanity in her because she feels for this this person who is of another race entirely, and of a race even that just took over her own people. And yet she has this feeling, but she respects the warrior in him. She respects his integrity. And so she's kind of on his side even. And there's this conflict within her. And Erikson builds all this up in this character. And that's why I care about what happens to her and her soldiers during the battle. And the same thing for Red Mask. I care about what happens to him and the people with him, because I like the way he treats Talk. You know, I can see that he has a cause that has some justice behind it, considering what the Lethari have done to his people. So of course I'm on a side, but what happens when I have two characters that I like and I'm on both their sides? Yeah. That's what you were talking about. And it's just so, I'm so invested in this, and I'm kind of just scared about what's going to happen, because somebody's got to lose.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. It's,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joanna.
no, I was just going to say, yes. I think that that's something that I appreciated more when I was looking back on it. And it's something I think it took me a while to really understand what was happening, because I could tell, like as a first time reader, I could tell that she was trying to protect him. But yeah, like you said, like she can't really say it out loud. And he's trying to tell her to, maybe you shouldn't do that. And, you know, they're trying to work together and maybe have some disagreements here and there about how to go about attacking the all, but trying to understand if they're on the same side or not. And then at that point when she basically lets him know that she had several of these assassins that were there to kill him. She had them killed. And it's like he suddenly realizes, it seems like he steps forward kind of like with honor. I think the idea there is he goes into the last battle. They both just willingly go in dying, but they know that they go in dying knowing that they were on the same side. And there's something just really powerful about that.
Handar's the eater that is, you know, he's in the court being like, hey guys, like, why are we acting like Lether, right? Like, is he the one that's like—
No, not in the court. That is—
who's that one?
Bruthan Trana.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Because they both have a B name.
Yes, that's why I was okay. Philip, what you said, I agree. Like, war for the sake of war, like battles, like I don't get excited about like random forces fighting. It's absolutely, you care about, you know, you care about the sides that you're on. Like the reason, like Chain of Dogs is so bloody tragic because of freaking Coltane. Like Coltane, he knows the futility of what he's doing from the start. But he can't show that to anybody. He's carrying the weight of 50,000 refugees on his person because that's his job. Like that's the job he has to do. And he's not even native Malazan. He's a Wiccan, you know? So, and then you see the freaking like native Malazans being huge traitors. And, you know, that's why I love Coltane, is because of you know, how like what a good character he is.
He's a brilliant character. And I mean, it has been a while since I read that book, but just remembering too the importance he placed on Duiker being with him and witnessing, and he understood the importance of history, and he understood that it wasn't going to probably favor him. And so being this far along now and seeing how that's playing out, it's just all the more heartbreaking. It makes me look back at that book and look back at Coltane with just, I just have so much emotion looking back at that character.
Yeah, and that's why the Siege of Yucatan is so terrifying, because it's our bone hunters. It's Fiddler. It's our boy Fiddler.
Yes.
Like, and all these characters we've spent several books with at this point. I mean, at least three, 2, 4, and 6, and they're underground. Like, first of all, the siege just in general, where Leomon is, I read that first, I'm like, what are you doing? Like olive oil? Like, what are you doing? Like, are you making pasta, Leomon of the Flails? Like, what's going on? And then it's just like, oh, it is so very obvious. And like, of course, upon second read, it's so very obvious that you're gonna set the place ablaze. And it's just like, oh my gosh, because it reminds me of, okay, so follow me to World War II. Like a lot of horrible things happen in World War II. A lot of horrific things happen in World War II. But the firebombing of Dresden, where like turned Dresden into molten slag, like the reports that like the actual like accounts that came out of Dresden, absolutely horrific with how hot it burned and just the horrible fates that people suffered from how freaking like hot everything burned, just fire everywhere. That reminded me a lot of that, and that is horrific because, and I'm not trying to compare horrors. I'm not, but I mean, the atomic bomb hits, boom, vaporized. But napalm and like firebombing is a much longer thing. Like it just freaks me out. And all of that fire everywhere in Yucatan, like it causes me so much stress. I remember the last time I read Yucatan, it was we were at Christmas or Thanksgiving, because we spend it with my wife's family, and I forget which one it was. And they're all like watching football or watching Hallmark movies. And I'm sitting there over at the table, like, I gotta finish Yucatan. They're like, do you want to go for a walk? I'm like, I'm good. I'll catch y'all later. Just finishing Yucatan because it's 130 pages. It's just, oh my gosh. Oh, and then they're trapped underground, which is also a terror I have, like of dying in a cave or underground or in like a cave dive. People that cave dive are insane. Like no, never, under no circumstances. No, sir, I'm not dying in the dark where no one's going to find me. Terrifying. It's so anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
And the brave, I just think like something that comes to mind when I think of Yucatan too is just the bravery of the bone hunters. Like I kept on linking it in my mind to the bridge burner mentality of the first in, last out, because of the idea of blowing back the fire and going straight in. Just that whole entire idea was just insane and so brave and powerful. Just the reasons that they went in and did that. And then, as you were talking, Philip, earlier about pathos, just the scenes between Korab and Fiddler. Yeah, I got so emotional over those scenes towards the end of that chapter, especially Korab. The way that Korab shifted his whole mindset throughout that chapter. And it was completely believable to me. It felt appropriate, the way it was paced, the way you sort of followed the trajectory of his thoughts there. Yeah, it was just such a powerful scene, but at the same time, just such a wild chapter. I mean, olive oil and then hallucinogenic honey, being trapped underground. It was just crazy. Yes.
The Korab Fiddler part after, of course, the bond that forms between them takes place as they're underground, as they're trapped in there. And it, as you said, it's a rebirth really for Korab, isn't it? He's coming out of the belly of the whale here, a different person. He had been so devoted to the cause, to the rebellion, to Leomon, and his whole image of Leomon was shattered as a result of Leomon's essentially betrayal of what he believed Leomon was all about and what he was all about. And Korab, whatever side he's on, he's a person with a strong sense of morality, and you could see him really had, and there's a kind of rigidity that can come with that, but he's a person of integrity, I think, and his whole world gets shattered there, and he has to kind of quickly adjust. And what happens with him and Fiddler? Wow, I mean, that's actually the part of the book that made me cry the most. Yeah. was the what happens with him and Fiddler, and how he insists on carrying Fiddler, even when Gessler comes back to look for them, and Gessler's like, okay, I can take him from here, you're obviously exhausted, and Korab was, no, I have to finish this.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's just so beautiful. And these two individuals, Fiddler and Korab, you can take them as individuals, and they are. But I also think there's just a huge lesson in here in humanity that, again, this is what I was saying earlier, I'm blown away continuously by what Erikson does before and after battles. And for me, this is just one of the most powerful, poignant things I've seen in literature.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think just tying it back into that first in, last out, like the bravery of Fiddler to go in, like going straight into that scene, into Ikaton when it's already on fire, but also how Fiddler and Korab, like Fiddler is trying to push everybody forward. Even though he's injured, he keeps on trying to push everybody forward before him. And then Korab keeps pulling himself back too and carrying Fiddler, and he doesn't want to race out of there either. And I can only imagine how terrifying it is to be untrapped underground and for them to have that kind of just that kind of care and that kind of loyalty to others. Plus, what you said about Korab is powerful because, you know, when he feels betrayed by Leomin, he was so loyal to Leomin. Leomin could do no wrong in Korab's eyes. And it would have been very easy, I think, for that kind of character to become very bitter and cynical and angry. And it says a lot, I think, about his character that he was able to shift to the way that he did in the time that he did. And I think you're absolutely right that he's a man of integrity. For sure.
Leomon is not. Leomon is a douchebag.
No.
That is my input to this conversation. I like the loyalty, the integrity of the Malazan Marine is one of my favorite things. They're constantly told to do things that is going to result in their death, like is going to result in the ultimate annihilation of the entire unit, and they do it anyway. Because that's what they signed up to do. And, you know, they don't have to. I mean, a lot of times they have absolutely the opportunity to, you know, get out of Dodge and go do something else. And they do it anyway, because, you know, that's who they are. Like they're constantly from freaking Black Coral to you know, the Army of the Whirlwind to, you know, Yucatan and Capistan, everything they're involved in. It's just, you know, and then further on past where you two have read, it's just constantly like, hey, so we're all going to die here. It's like, all right, I guess that's what we're going to do then. I guess we're all going to die. First in, last out.
Yeah, Coral is the one you made me think of, Alan. Coral.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then, you know, they're also forced. Even the bridge burners are forced into retirement afterwards. They'd probably keep going anyway because that's who they are. You know, they're soldiers. I love I just love the soldier character just in general. Like I love the soldier archetype. I hope you guys are going to talk about the soldier archetype in your archetype discussion.
Okay.
Do it.
Well, yeah. Soldier archetype.
I love
that'd be fantastic. I love the soldier archetype too.
Same.
I love it. I love just that sort of brotherhood, that loyalty, and also the way that they don't really, you know, that they kind of poke fun at each other and don't, I don't know, like they don't take each other too seriously either, if that makes sense. I'm probably not saying that right, but yeah.
Oh no, you made perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. Pete, do you want to add anything to anything we said?
I'm going to go back to Korab, just because I think that's an excellent illustration in regards to followership in what blind faith does to a person. And you're absolutely right, Johanna, that Yucatan, that Korab could have easily become very bitter. And you see a little bit of that happening. But the trauma and the change that happens underneath Yucatan kind of forces him not to concentrate on that bitterness and forces him to concentrate on getting out alive and Fiddler. And that creates that bond between Korab and the rest of the people underneath, that he's like, there is something more to live for besides just dying in the flames because I've been betrayed by the person that I blindly followed here because I thought he was going to lead this rebellion to victory.
Yeah.
And I think there's other places in this series as well that Erickson criticizes blind faith.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
it's always fun to see. And then he also follows it up in Reaper's Gale with Beak, with like the 40 pages of pain that he gave us, or whatever it is. Say again?
I said poor Beak.
Yeah.
Yes, poor Beak.
Because I think at the beginning of Beak's story, it felt like Beak was blindly following the Malazans, essentially, his leadership, because he didn't necessarily have, he was just like, I got to protect my friends, and that's kind of it. And then you see him develop more concrete reasons why, essentially, over those pages, where he starts following his captain, and he sees like, oh yeah, the captain, I have to trust the captain, not just because the captain's my friend, but because the captain knows what she's doing. And just like be like, hey, it's just an interesting follow-up to Bone Hunters, in my opinion.
Talking about, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, talking about the blind faith thing, like I prefer the true believer character to the opportunist of Leomon, who doesn't believe in anything and weaponizes other people's beliefs for whatever particular nefarious end he needs now. We have a bunch of that like in real life. And so when I see that crap in books, those characters enrage me. The people that take advantage of people who have belief in something. Leomon doesn't believe in anything. Like Leomon believes in preserving Leomon of the flails. That's what Leomon believes in, at least as far as we've seen in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I despise characters like that, because Leomon doesn't believe in the Shaiks' rebellion. He's just there because he got in trouble in North Genabacus and needed to go somewhere else, so he's hiding out there until he screws that up, and he does that. And he's like, whoop, well, better move on to the next sucker. He's the guy with the wagon that comes to sell you snake oil that's going to fix your baldness in the town, and has to go to the next one before they find out and run him out of town on a rail. That's who he is. He's Professor freaking Harold Hill from The Music Man. That's true. You heard it here first.
Yes, indeed.
I think everyone heard it here first.
Yeah. Leomon, the snake oil seller. Yeah,
I hate him.
Definitely. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I think like the other thing I was just going to say about Beak is how I think that Beak, it's I don't know, it might be a little bit of a stretch to say this, but I feel as though Beak, I mean, he was so hard on himself, but I think through his relationship with Feridan Sort and her valuing what he had to say and what his magical skills, I think that maybe gave him a sense of purpose too, and a sense of self-worth too, that maybe he didn't have before. So I think that was an important part of the friendship bond, rather than the blind worship kind of bond, maybe.
I think we see that a lot with the Malazan military. I mean, just going back to Whiskey Jack, and like he gets these explosives and he's like, I don't know what to do with these. Hey, Fiddler, Hedge, come here, go play with these. He trusts his people to just go mess with them and tell him, hey, these things are useful for this, 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 and this. And that was the genesis of the Sappers. It was so beautiful to see that. I can't even remember which book that was in, but I think it was afterwards. I don't remember when they talked about it, but seeing that was just so fun. I think it was probably Bone Hunters, because that was when Hedge came back. No, Hedge came back in Reaper's Gale, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I think you were right. I think he does appear, but he has a much bigger role in Reaper's Gale. Yeah.
Can we
Go ahead.
Can we talk about Capistan? Can we talk about Capistan?
Yeah, we can talk about Capistan, sure.
I want to talk about Capistan so bad. Like,
there's so many tough losses at Capistan.
Yeah, Capistan. Yeah, Capistan is like it's the most like official definition of a siege, like protecting the walls, and it goes on for a long time. Like it goes on. I mean, the Siege of Pale is over pretty quickly. It's just complete annihilation by Tayshrin and the mages. But Capistan lasts forever forever. And it's just like them defending the walls, and then them defending the walls well. But there's only so much you can do when your opponent has so many bodies that it doesn't matter how many die. It doesn't matter how high your walls are, because they're literally going to climb over the stack of the dead to get over the walls. It's just overwhelming by numbers. And, you know, Annister doesn't care about the bloody tennis scouring. There's, you know, hundreds of thousands, and who cares? You know, it's just throw more people at them. And it's a case of like numbers really overwhelming, much better preparedness, much better command, much better leadership. Like Kapistan was prepared. It should have been able to hold, but not against a horde that big. Like, you just can't. It's too big. And then they break in, and like you're talking about, like we're talking about pathos and the reason people are fighting. I submit to you, Gruntle and the Child Standard. Like, Gruntle and the Child Standard is one of the most powerful like images for me personally. Like, let alone the absolute ridiculous imagery of a tenement building being so filled with dead bodies that the walls are bulging from the gases and fluids. That's ludicrous. That's ludicrous imagery, but it's also horrific. And Gruntle standing there, this unkillable murder machine, carving thousands of Tenascalri to pieces, while having that, what is it? Is it the bloody tunic of the kid?
There was a child's tunic.
Yeah, just standing there doing this because of that, and the fact that Stani was assaulted. And he's just like, Gruntle's done. And hold on. Gruntle is Gruntle in Toll the Hounds? Is Gruntle in? I'm not going to talk about Gruntle.
I don't know.
I'm not going to talk about Gruntle. But Gruntle is in freaking Memories of Ice. Like, I love Gruntle. Because I love that character who's like, no more. Like, he's resistant. He don't want to do this. He's a caravan guard. He's a caravan guard. He doesn't want to be involved in this crap. It killed Harlow. It's all this war has like driven. Who's his buddy? Not Bent. That's the dog.
The one who becomes the bird.
The bird, yeah. Like, his buddy is depressed and wants to kill himself. Stani's been assaulted, and Gruntle finally says, to quote Picard, the line must be drawn here, no further. He's done. Gruntle said enough. And, you know, he embraces, Treach? Is that it? Is that it? Treach?
It's Treach.
And just, you know, goes the way of the tiger. And I love that part.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%, Alan. That is a pretty powerful arc in there, Gruntle's. But I also think the Grey Swords are very much something we should talk about as well. The leadership of Bruchalion, and of course Idkovian, who is a standout character for me in this book, an absolute standout character, and the nature of sacrifice. And you talked about the integrity of the soldier before, and I think the Grey Swords are like the paladins of the Malazan world. I mean, they're just so honorable, but there's a cost to it, isn't there? There's a real cost to it. And the kind of leadership that Bruchalion exhibits is, I think, extremely admirable and noble, but at the same time, one could argue that it's flawed in the sense, because it leads him to do things like his death scene is really, I just thought, oh my God, he didn't have to march in there like that, did he? I mean, they could have been more, you know, conniving or clever, but he just kind of goes in, and of course he knows what's going to happen afterwards as well, and that's part of the reason why he does it. But I'm just thinking, wow, they're so honorable, and of course Idkovian's sacrifice in regard to the Tlanamas later on is none of those weeping moments in the book, and not necessarily when he does it, but when you see how the soldiers react to it, and they start putting their, their mementos on his funeral mound, and that's the scene that gets you. And it's because these gray swords have been built up so well into these just such honorable characters, I think, and so they're just such a powerful part of Memories of Ice.
Ikovian is incredible. What a powerful, compassionate character. Probably the most compassionate character I can think of in this series so far.
I love Ikovian, and I agree with everything you say. And yet, at the end of Memories of Ice, I'm like, Ikovian, couldn't it just have waited like a couple days so that maybe everyone doesn't get murdered taking Coral? Like, couldn't we just have used the Talana Mas to win this battle and then freed them?
Like, I had that same question.
I'm just like, you're literally killing everyone at Ikovian. You are murdering all of the bridge burners, and I'm mad at you because
so this is the uncompromising honor and integrity of the Grey Swords. Ikovian knows that the Talana Mas have been sorely used and that they need to be reunited with their humanity. Yeah. And that is the moment. That's the moment. And to wait any longer is to be cynical, is to use them in the way that, Silver Fox was kind of like, well, just a little bit longer, guys. And then after this one more job, then I'll let you go. And Ikovian's like, no, this is the right thing to do. And I'm going to do it. So,
yeah. And
it kind of reminds me a little bit of that Stormlight quiz you took earlier this year with your wife, and how, Alan, about, does the end justify the means?
and it doesn't. Like, it doesn't. And I agree. Yeah. Ikovian did the right thing. But the thing I like about the series is they are frequently doing things that I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Oh, okay. Like, Ikovian, I get that's the right thing to do. And I understand, Philip, because I'm completely with you, because otherwise you're literally using them the same way Silver Fox, the same way Kellenved, the same way like Lacine wants to, like the same way everyone wants to use them. It's just like, we'll just do one more thing. But at the same time, I like the bridge burners. They're going to die because of you. I am now angry at you because a bunch of bridge burners died because you just couldn't throw the undead. They can't die, really. Like, just throw them. Like, take Black Coral. Like, it's sacrificing what? They're already dead. Like, it's fine. Save the living. So I am torn in the middle of like, yes, you must do the right thing, because I am very, very like, yes, correct. That's the right thing to do. And at the same time, but we're saving lives. Like, just a minute. Like, just a minute. It's just good. Like, there's so many moments in there that are like that. And I get mad because I'm just like, you're not doing what I want you to do. Please stop.
Yeah, that's Erickson.
Yeah.
You had the same, I think you had the same idea too about the bridge burners. Was it the bridge burners? I'm sorry, that went ahead to Coral, how they split up. Right.
What are you doing? Wait, who is commanding this army? Wait for the main force. What? Why are they separating their forces and attacking separately? Why? Why aren't they attacking as a coordinated force?
There's an explanation for that too. And that is, don't forget that the Malazans were allied with Anomander Rake and Kaladin Brood. And these are not allies who are really comfortable with one another. So the Malazans want to establish a beachhead here. They want to get ahead of the others. They're not, exactly showing their hand to their allies here. So it was an imperial decision. And as we've observed before, soldiers do their duty. Yeah. So the bridge burners were told, we need you to get in there first because we want to control this territory. And they probably did underestimate the amount of resistance they were going to meet.
Buzzards.
Yeah, buzzards and all that. So,
well, see my previous thoughts on Lacine's management.
Yeah,
I have filed a complaint and given her a 1-star Yelp review. Killed all my bridge burners. So sad.
You and Kalam.
So sad. Where's Callum? Floating around, killing things. Like, he's just him and his like in Deadhouse Gates, man struggles to kill a whole hand of claw, right? Like there's like 5 of them or whatever. End of Bone Hunters, man's carving a murder canyon through like 100 claw.
So beautiful.
Talk about a power up. Like, whoa. That's that scene from the palace back to the boats at the end of Bone Hunters is so good. It's so good. It's so good. And the first time you see, like, really the first time you see any humanity in Tavor, any weakness in Tavor, and the fact that she's just like, are you going to help me or not? Like, are you with me or are you not? Like, I like Tavor. Tavor fills me with rage because she doesn't have to be as uncommunicative as she is. She could throw them a bone. Like, it's possible to talk to your soldiers and let them in on what the plan is. Like, she doesn't have to be the way she is, but I still like her. And I mean, I do, but she's just like,
I really
just tell
do.
them.
Yeah. I mean, I've been confused throughout most of the series so far as a first-time reader, and I don't know what's going to happen in the last 3 books with Tavor, but I really love the way her character is written, and I actually really love that she makes that choice, because it just makes you, from one perspective, it seems like she's trying really hard to make her leadership more solid by being more removed, and it's doing just having the exact opposite effect on everyone. And I find that so fascinating. I know it's actually kind of divisive for some readers about Tavor, not getting into her head and feeling like I've heard some readers struggle with not feeling like they can connect with Tavor, but I personally love the way she's written. I love that I don't see inside her head, and that I'm having this perspective of her from the outside with these other soldiers. I just think it's so fascinating. And at the end of Bone Hunters, like you said, it was all the more powerful just to see her kind of freak out, to see her kind of panic and not know what she was doing. I think that's fascinating, the way that character is written.
Well, we feel like the soldiers do, because we're not in Tavor's head. We're like, what are you doing? Can you tell us what the plan is? So, I mean, I like that we're not in her head, even though she drives me so crazy, but I still like her. But I'm just like, just tell him. Like,
but this is another thing that Erikson is so brilliant at, which is presenting the surface, what's on, visible to the viewer, but we get all these hints about what's going on underneath. There's in Tavor, yes, we see that she doesn't communicate a whole lot. She's a very kind of stiff personality, but I think we get plenty of hints along the way that there's a lot going on inside her. And it's the same thing with the Malazans. When you're talking about the tragedy of the Malazans in Memories of Ice, I'll tell you which part grabbed me the most. It was at the end at Kroll's bar with the survivors, and Duiker shows up. And that scene is just, there's so much understatement to it, because there's just this is vast sorrow and loss beneath the surface there that is guiding that whole scene, but you don't necessarily see it. They don't necessarily let that show, but it's there and you feel it and it's there. And that scene just broke me into pieces because of everything that they went through and all the losses they've experienced. And that's when it really hit me what happened to the bridge burners was at the end of that scene in Kroll's bar. That is just such a potent scene and so well done on Erikson's part. And that's what he does. He's so good at giving you the surface and letting the reader figure out what's going on underneath that deceptively calm surface. So yeah, I just think it's so brilliant.
I love it.
That's the part, like, that continues in Toll the Hounds. Like, that's my favorite part of Toll the Hounds, the Kroll's bar stuff, the stuff with the remaining bridge burners, because they're still feeling that loss. I really like those parts in Toll the Hounds.
You're making me so excited. Don't spoil anything.
I'm not. I'm just saying there are parts. I'm saying that because I have historically talked about how I do not enjoy Toll the Hounds. There are many parts of Toll the Hounds that I do enjoy. And it's the stuff with something I can't talk about because it will spoil. And then the stuff at Kroll's bar with Picker et al. Or whatever. I really just enjoy that stuff. I'm not a huge fan of like long-lived races, just really in fantasy, just in general. So the Andi don't do it for me. And they're in Toll the Hounds. So.
Great. Yeah.
I think so. Jumping back to Tavor, I think she's a great character because there's just such an interesting parallel between the speech that she gives to the Malazans and her whole journey. So in Reaper's Gale, she's talking about, okay, look, or it's either at the end of Bone Hunters, beginning of Reaper's Gale. She's talking about, hey, look, we're going to be unwitnessed. We're going off the grid. We're going to go after this thing. And nobody's going to know the sacrifices we make. Tavor herself, not only to the Malazans, but to the reader as well, has gone unwitnessed her entire storyline because we don't know what's going on in her head. And I'm releasing a predictions video for Dust of Dreams and Chain of and Crippled God later after I edit it. And like that's one of the things that I point in is like she's got some line to something, because the fact that she knows the Crippled God exists is kind of like, where'd you learn that for? What's going on? You got something else behind you with this. Is it strings or is it somebody feeding you information? So that's why she's such an interesting character for me, because there's so much mystery to her.
Joanna, I would request that you reform this panel after both of y'all have finished Crippled God, because I would be, yes. Because Philip knows I have, like, there are many things to say that require finishing Crippled God. So I would love to discuss Dust of Dreams and Crippled God once y'all are done.
I would love to.
It's good stuff. Like, it is good stuff. So.
Oh man, I'm so excited. I cannot wait to move on in this series now.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I love about, I love military fantasy. Like I love military fantasy more than most of my friends on BookTube. You know, I always hear people like, I don't really like military fantasy, but I like this anyway. I'm like, why do y'all hate it? Like, why do y'all hate war so much? What do you mean? I love that soldier archetype. And I also love the brilliant commander. Like, I love the brilliant commander, and I love the soldier archetype that's just doing what he's doing. And that's one of the reasons that I love Samuel Vimes so much. He's not a soldier. He's very specific that he's not a soldier. He's a watchman. But it's the same thing of a guy doing the job that he chooses to do. You know, this is the job put in front of him. And he may not know why he's always doing it, but he's doing it, and he's going to do the best he can. And I just love those types, because they're never power hungry. They're often abused by those in power. And I despise the general that is incompetent, but is some kind of noble that forces you to listen to his terrible ideas and gets people killed. I hate that archetype. The same way that High Lord Pormqual can go kick rocks, fly a kite. Philip, it was in 2008. I was a student. I was studying in Fukuoka, Japan. I was sitting in my dorm room reading when Pormqual got Coltane killed. It is the only time in this entire series I threw the book. I was so angry because the whole time, like, I wasn't familiar with Erickson. Like, I had read most of the fantasy I'd read, Forgotten Realms books where no one ever dies. No one dies in D&D books. But then you read Black Company where everyone dies. And I've read Sharp where, Sharp doesn't die, but everyone else does. And Game of Thrones where everyone dies. And I'm like, is Coltane even going to make it? And then we're within sight of Aaron. And I'm like, yes. this is going to be the moment of triumph, because that's what happens in fantasy books, guys. That's what happens in fantasy books. You strip everything away from the heroes, you strip everything from them, and then in the last moment, they triumph. That's why we read fantasy, because we can't do that in real life. We have everything and then we're beaten down and our lives are terrible. But no, in fantasy, that's where they conquer. And you're like, yes, this gives me hope in my life. And then Steven Erikson, a mean man, has this horrible High Lord Pormqual listen to this dumb, stupid, bedangled, like jewelry wearing, robe wearing, oily Malik Rel. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? It costs you nothing. He's right there. He's right there. And I threw the book because this is how impassioned The Chain of Dogs makes me. I was so angry. And you want to talk about what broke my heart? The very first time I felt shattered after all this was when freaking, who has to do it? Blistig commands Squints or whatever to shoot Coltan.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and he's like, and then his mental status is now shattered. And I had never seen that. You don't lose at the gates of Aaron. You lose at the crossing, Vathar's crossing or whatever it is. That's where the battle's lost. You don't lose within sight of the gates in fantasy. That's not how it works. Sorry guys, I don't even know what to say. I just described to you my entire journey the first time I read Deadhouse Gates, because it's just so good.
I have it right here. Such a powerful book.
I love that kind of stuff. And that's why I understand why people when they're like, I don't really like Deadhouse Gates, because there's a lot of stuff in it that I understand, it's different than Gardens of the Moon, it's different characters. I get that. But the fact that the Chain of Dogs exists will always keep Deadhouse Gates in my top tier, because I have rarely ever felt such raw emotions than the first time I read The Chain of Dogs. I'd never seen anything like it. So.
Yep. And it's possible that Erikson figured out that ending is more powerful than it would have been if they had made it.
It still makes me mad.
I know.
That's the point, though, right?
Angry.
Yeah. No, I'm shattered right now listening to Alan. I don't know how much I can go on, because I'm feeling shattered. That just hearing you laughing as well. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at your pain.
It's fine. The heroes don't lose in the last second. That doesn't happen. You win. You win at the end. That's what fantasy is. The heroes win at the end. No.
Sorry, not that trope.
No.
Yep.
No. Well, I think that just about covers everything for now, especially since we're going to probably re-meet after Pete and I finish the series. That is the goal, right? So
Crippled God. I don't understand. Crippled God. The final 300 pages of Crippled God. Gosh dang. That is some good stuff. That's some good stuff. And also the first 100 pages of Dust of Dreams, I think, are the best first 100 pages of any Malazan book. I'll stand by that. I love the first 100 pages of Dust of Dreams.
Yeah. The Crippled God will cleanse your soul.
Wow.
You guys are making me want to binge these things.
But before it cleanses your soul, Philip, it will destroy your soul.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me with the stuff that happens in those two books? What is going on? It's good stuff.
Wow. Well, I want to thank all three of you for joining me today. This has been so much fun. It's making me so excited to continue. And I already want to reread everything because of everything we discussed. It was just so fantastic to relive some of these moments. So thank you all so much for joining me today.
I'd start a reread if they weren't so stinking long. I've got so much else to read. I can't. I do need to continue with Stonewielder, though. Philip told me there's naval battles in Stonewielder.
Oh, you're gonna love Stonewielder. You're gonna love it, and Orb Sector Throne too, man. Oh my goodness. Well, Krupp is there, but you're still gonna love it. So.
Okay, I will say, like, I developed a perverse affection for Krupp during Toll the Hounds. And I do not speak of it because then it removes some of the important distaste that I have for Krupp in books 1 and 3. But by the end of Toll the Hounds, I'm like, no, do I like Krupp now? No, no, I don't like Pust. That never changed. But Krupp kind of grew on me like a sore or a rash.
Fungus.
Yeah, it's like, a rash that you don't want it there, but when it's gone, you miss it because you miss like the satisfaction of scratching it. That's Krupp to me. So, but yeah, like I'm gonna go see where I can fit in Stonewielder now, Philip. Like just talking about this stuff, like talking about books makes me want to read more. I'm sure that's everyone's experience. So
it's a problem.
Yeah, just wait until after later today, and I'm gonna jump into more LPQ probably.
Yes, finish the Long Price Quartet. Philip, read Long Price Quartet.
I'll plug for Long Price Quartet. I haven't read it yet, but definitely high on the.
If I can find a copy, Alan, because
I know. Alan, what have you done? We can't find copies.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Actually,
your fault.
But y'all heard AP last night say it was brilliant, so we got AP's backing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Please check out all these wonderful channels. Chances are you are already subscribed to them, but I'm also very excited too for Pete's. I guess I can't watch it yet, but I'm very excited, Pete, for your Crippled God, Dust of Dreams prediction video. So that will be very exciting. Of course, I'll have all 3 channels linked in the description below. And thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Joanna.
Bye.
Thank you.